What are the biggest mistakes 1Ls make on law school final exams? Great question, because there are a ton of them, all of which I know I made as a 1L in law school too. But because final exams are still the majority, if not the entirety of your grade 1L year, and because of how disproportionately powerful 1L grades are in the job market, we need to know exactly what these things are so we avoid these pitfalls and rack up as many points as possible on our law school final exams. So before we dive into these things, what they are and how to avoid them, keep in mind that if you would like to walk through step by step in a kick-ass final exam strategy and exactly how to prepare and go in confident and clear, definitely click here to apply for one of the limited one-on-one final exam deep dive sessions that I will be offering at the end of each semester. With that, guys, if you're ready to dive in, hit that like button and let's go. The first mistake is not showing your work. So when you are writing a final exam answer, what you'll hear very often explained is that you have to show your work like a math problem, meaning you have to walk the professor step by step through your analytical, logical thinking process to get to the conclusion that you come to. And just like in math, it can feel very duplicative and obvious and almost unnecessary, but if you don't show your work, you are going to get 0 points. So the most common way that this comes up is by people starting off their answer simply restating the facts from the fact pattern. But when you do that, you're not telling the professor why those facts are relevant. In order for facts to be legally relevant, they have to be tied back to rule language. So the easiest way to think about this is that rule plus facts equals argument. So in your final exam answer, you always want to state it or frame it as P will argue rule language is met because of facts. D will argue rule language is not met because of facts. If we don't have both of those things, simply restating the facts will get you 0 points. Another big mistake that we as 1Ls make in our law school final exam answers is what is known as rule dumping. And rule dumping is when you write every single thing you know about a particular legal topic on the page before you start your analysis. And the reason why we do this is we want to show the professor everything that we've learned over the course of the semester. But when we do this, not only do we waste time, but more importantly, we are indicating to the professor that we don't actually know what rule language is specifically applicable to this fact pattern. And the reason why this is complicated is because there's actually a lot of rule language that relates to any given legal issue. We have the parent rule language, we have the rule language for each element of the parent rule, and we have situation-specific rules that only get triggered by specific facts. And so by writing down every single rule that we know about this legal issue, we are indicating to the professor that we don't actually know what parts of that rule language apply to this fact pattern, and we waste time because we are not doing the thing that gets us all the points, which is arguing that specific facts from the fact pattern, you guessed it, satisfy this specific rule language, or that specific facts from the fact pattern do not satisfy this rule language. Another huge mistake that happens all the time on 1L final exam answers is what is known as conclusory reasoning. And conclusory reasoning is essentially using the rule language to argue that a rule of law is met. It's very similar to the idea of using a word to then define that word. It's circular. And so in order to break this cycle, this circle, what we actually need are outside facts, facts from the fact pattern, to argue that a rule of law is in fact met. Now, I know it feels repetitive and unnecessary and obvious to use facts from the fact pattern to argue that a rule of law is met. That is literally how we get points on a final exam. Otherwise, we could all walk around arguing that D is guilty of murder because D intentionally killed P. The next big mistake that I see people making all the time is spending way too much time on the first issue. So to back it up a little bit, when we talk about final exams, we're talking about fact patterns that are long and convoluted, where a lot of people are doing a lot of things to each other, creating a lot of problems. And then at the end, there is one open-ended question asking you to analyze all of the legal issues that you spot in the fact pattern. And as you can imagine, that could be anywhere from 7 to 15 to 39 different issues that you spot. And so what winds up happening is that people default and go all in on that very first issue, wasting incredibly precious time building out a really, really thorough analysis for that first issue, which doesn't give them enough time to go through and analyze all the other issues they spot. Now, the reason why this is a problem is because most law school professors write exams that are impossible to finish in the 3 to 4 hours of time allotted. And they do this intentionally to try to create a distribution along a curve where only a few of the students actually finish the exam and the majority of the students don't. Now, I'm not saying I agree with this grading system, but I am saying that is how it currently works. And so we need to be incredibly intentional about how much time we are spending on each issue that we spot so that we are doing an accelerated analysis for those issues that are not very present or contested in the fact pattern and slowing it down and taking more time on the issues that are incredibly present, that have an incredibly high number of facts in the fact pattern that we can use to analyze the big potatoes in that fact pattern. Another big mistake that I see 1Ls make in final exams all the time is deciding which party will win before actually doing their analysis. Now, this makes total sense because as humans, we tend to default into right answer mode. We tend to default into who wins, who loses, what's the conclusion, and then writing an analysis that backs up that conclusion. But when we do that, we close off our minds to what are known as counterarguments, meaning arguments that go against the primary argument that we're making. And in law school world, we get points for both. We get points for all the arguments we make that a certain rule of law is met by the facts and all the counterarguments for why that rule of law is not met by the facts. And this is incredibly, incredibly important when we're talking about law school final exams because professors actually write the fact patterns intentionally ambiguously so as to open the door to both arguments and counterarguments. And so when we make up our mind as to who is going to win a particular legal issue before we ever start writing, we are leaving so many points on the table that our professor has intentionally put there for us to get. Now, I'm not going to lie. There are tons of mistakes that we as 1Ls make on law school final exams that prevent us from going after all of those juicy points that we can accumulate to move us further and further up the curve. But those are 5 really big ones I see 1Ls making over and over and over. So if you are a 1L heading into final exam season and you would love to build out a rock solid 1L final exam strategy together, definitely click here to apply for one of the limited one-on-one final exam deep dive session spots that I'm opening up this month. And if you are heading into final exam season, I hope you have an amazing final exam season. I wish you the best of luck. You've got this. You're almost on the other side. And I will see you guys in the next video.